The movie begins with a police officer named Lin Dong, who receives a call from a doctor informing him that his daughter, Shi, has been diagnosed with leukemia and is currently hospitalized for treatment. Since it's her birthday, Lin, as a loving father, quickly heads to the hospital to be with her. However, just as he is about to arrive, his assistant Susan calls him urgently, informing him that they have an important assignment to protect a doctor named James, who is in danger. It turns out that Dr. James is a secret researcher for a large company, and he is working on a biochemical weapon experiment, but something goes wrong. The roid serum he creates ends up killing everyone in the facility, including the owner of the company. Now, James is the next target, and Lin must protect him. When Lin hears the order, he feels confused and deeply frustrated with his situation. He can't help but cry, knowing he has to leave his critically ill daughter for this important mission. When they arrive at Dr. James's location, Lin, Susan, and their team start securing both James and his creation, a mechanical heart. However, just as they are about to leave, they are suddenly ambushed by a group of armed men, led by a man named Andre. It turns out he is one of James's failed experiments, and moments later, a fierce battle breaks out. During the attack, Lin instructs Susan to take Dr. James to safety while he attempts to block Andre's movements. Despite Lin's best efforts, he can't defeat Andre and is thrown back by a strong explosion. As Andre attempts to kill Dr. James and take his heart, Lin regains consciousness and slams into Andre with a vehicle. He then uses the car to pin Andre against an oil tank. However, even in that situation, it seems Andre is still unharmed. When Lin realizes it is nearly impossible to kill Andre, he has no choice but to shoot the tank, triggering a huge explosion. After the blast, Lin loses consciousness and receives a call from the hospital, informing him that his daughter had passed away. Then, Dr. James takes Lin's phone and mentions he has an unexpected plan for Shi. 13 years later in Australia, we meet a well-known author named Rick Rogers, who publishes a book titled Bleeding Steel. The book is about a former Marine who receives a mechanical heart transplant. After the book is published, Rick decides to hire an escort, hoping to enjoy some company and relax in the comfort of his private room for the evening. To his shock, the call girl drugs his drink and reveals that she is actually a man named Hao. Afterward, Hao begins copying all the detailed information from Rick's book stored on his computer. At the same hotel, a group of armored men, led by a woman named Tess, shows up. Fortunately, Hao is able to successfully copy all the necessary information and quickly hides himself in the bathtub to avoid being caught. It turns out that Tess is also after the valuable data from Rick Rogers. A few moments later, a masked man appears and fights with Tess. In the middle of the battle, Tess accidentally kills Rick Rogers, while the masked man manages to escape. When the police arrive at the scene, Hao also successfully escapes from the hotel. Later on, the masked man returns to his apartment, where it is revealed that he is actually Lin, who is also after the data from Rick Rogers. The next day, Tess visits her boss aboard a ship, and it is revealed that her superior is none other than Andre, the same man who, somehow, survived the explosion 13 years ago. However, Andre is now infected, which is why he must remain inside a sterile room like this one. There, Andre and Tess identify the man in the ski mask from the previous night, and it is none other than Lin. Upon witnessing this, Andre immediately gives the order for Tess to eliminate Lin and to track down Hao without hesitation. Meanwhile, Hao begins analyzing Rick Rogers' data and discovers information about a beautiful woman named Nancy. Driven by curiosity, he decides to meet her at Sydney University, the place where she is currently studying, hoping to learn more about her. At the same time, Tess tracks down Hao, but when she raids his apartment, she discovers the location is a fake. The real Hao is actually inside a camper van. In the next scene, Hao visits Nancy's school and spots her buying breakfast at a store where Lin is working as a server. Just as Nancy is about to eat, two bullies cause a disruption, leading to a fight. Fortunately, Lin steps in and breaks up the fight. What's astonishing is that Nancy's hand wounds miraculously heal, almost as if she possesses some kind of mutant power. After getting back to her apartment, Nancy has a dream in which she sees several men working in a laboratory, making her roommate anxious. The next day, Nancy goes to a chaotic residential area to meet with a shaman. She tells the shaman that her visions have become sharper over time, and she feels as though she is transforming into someone else, much like the things she is seeing. To help Nancy forget her visions, the shaman hypnotizes her. However, during the hypnosis, Nancy experiences another vision. This time, it is of Dr. James working on Andre. The experiment failed, and Andre killed several researchers in the laboratory. The shaman reveals that there is another soul inside Nancy, which is why she is experiencing these visions. He gives her a ticket to a magic show and recommends that she meet the magician, believing it could help with her memory problem. On her way home, Nancy is approached by a group of young thugs who attempt to harass her. She fights back against one of them and tries to flee. Unfortunately, she ends up on the rooftop, surrounded by even more men. Just as she is about to be assaulted, Hao arrives at the perfect moment to save her. However, it turns out that Hao isn't as skilled in combat as Lin. With no other option, he seizes the opportunity to get Nancy out of there. A chase ensues, but Hao and Nancy successfully escape and manage to outrun the gangsters. Before Nancy leaves, Hao quietly takes the ticket the shaman has given her and makes plans to follow the woman wherever she goes. The following day, Nancy goes to the Sydney Opera House to meet the magician, but since her ticket is missing, the guards won't let her in. At that moment, Hao reappears and poses as a staff member. He tells the two guards that Nancy is his girlfriend, and as a result, she is allowed in even without a ticket. However, once inside, the event organizer pulls Hao away to assist with the show. Meanwhile, Nancy is somehow invited to take part in the magician's show. While under hypnosis, she sees herself as a child being looked after by an elderly man. However, just before she can see his face, Tess and her group show up to abduct her. Fortunately, after Tess kills the magician, Lin arrives and begins fighting her and her minions on stage. Lin fights fiercely against Tess's men, while Hao chases after Tess, who is trying to take the unconscious Nancy away. Before long, Lin and Tess have a showdown, and Hao manages to rescue Nancy. While Hao continues to get Nancy away from Tess, Lin lures Tess to the rooftop where they fight once again. In the end, Lin nearly falls off the rooftop but manages to grab onto a cable. He uses the cable to slide down and escape with Hao and Nancy aboard a speedboat. Afterward, Lin brings the still unconscious Nancy to his apartment. After laying her on the bed, he drags Hao down to the basement, ties him up, and interrogates him about why he is following Nancy. With no way out, Hao admits that he got information about Nancy from the data of the writer Rick Rogers. He also reveals that the shaman Nancy frequently visited had been selling him hypnotic therapy videos from Rick Rogers. Upon learning this, Lin decides to head to the shaman's place, but when he arrives, he finds the shaman already dead. At the same time, he realizes that Nancy has left the house. When Lin returns, he discovers that Nancy is now heading to Hong Kong. Without wasting any time, he hands Hao the keys to his shackles, telling him to free himself as soon as he can. Just then, Tess's men suddenly arrive at the house, surrounding the area. Seeing no other option, Lin quickly detonates the explosives he has planted throughout the house and escapes, determined to catch up to Nancy. While on his way to Hong Kong, Lin recalls the events that happened 13 years ago. It turns out that Nancy is actually Lin's daughter, Shishi. After the fight with Andre, Susan told Lin that Dr. James had brought Shishi back to life by implanting a mechanical heart into her body. In order to activate the heart, Dr. James had to transfer his biological DNA to Shishi, which is why Nancy is having visions of James and Andre, who also received Dr. James's DNA. However, after Shishi was revived, she lost all of her memories. For her daughter's safety, Lin asked Susan to send her to an orphanage in Australia to keep her away from those who might be searching for her biological DNA. When Lin arrives in Hong Kong, Susan picks him up and takes him to the police station. Later on, Lin borrows a police car to search for Shishi. Meanwhile, Nancy, who still has memories of Dr. James, goes to the doctor's old apartment. There, she finds a key that triggers the return of all her memories, including those of her father, Lin, who had been watching over her even while she was in Australia. Unexpectedly, Tess suddenly appears and abducts Nancy without hesitation. Fortunately, while driving, Lin sees Nancy being held hostage by Tess and quickly chases after their vehicles. Meanwhile, Hao, who has also arrived in Hong Kong, deliberately spills oil on the road, causing Lin's car and another one to slip and overturn. Lin quickly rushes to rescue Nancy, only to find that she isn't in the car he has targeted. Luckily, Hao, a skilled hacker, manages to track down Nancy and discovers that Tess has brought her to a hotel. On the other hand, Tess has arrived at the hotel, but Nancy is no longer with them. Tess hands the hotel staff the key she has taken from Nancy. The staff then escorts them to a room where Dr. James' handheld camera is concealed. At that moment, the SWAT team arrives, locks Tess and her men in the room, and uses tranquilizers to knock them out. Soon after, Lin and Hao, who have just arrived, get word from Susan that Tess has been captured. Then, Susan shows them Dr. James's handheld camera, which contains videos about the creation of biological DNA genes that could give people regenerative abilities. It turns out that James had passed those special genes to Nancy and Andre, granting them mutant-like abilities. Susan and Lin finally realize why Andre is relentlessly pursuing Nancy. He intends to take her blood to heal himself. This will also give Andre unimaginable strength and the ability to regenerate, turning him into the world's first super bio warrior. Aside from that, Susan also reveals that Andre has secretly made a deal with arms dealers and is planning to steal Dr. James's video to create their own army of immortal soldiers. After discovering Andre's terrifying plan, Susan, Lin, and Hao disguise themselves as Tess and her men. They manage to sneak onto the ship where Andre is already holding Nancy captive. Right then, Andre starts injecting Nancy's blood into himself, and he quickly begins to recover. Lin and his team eventually reach the laboratory, but they can't get Nancy out because of the bulletproof glass. Not long after, Andre's men close in on them, leaving Lin no choice but to take them all on. In the middle of the fight, Andre stops the blood transfusion and takes on all three of them. After a long and intense battle, Andre manages to defeat all of them. Just as Andre is about to finish off Lin, Nancy's strength suddenly returns, and she breaks free from the bulletproof glass to save her father. Then, Lin grabs the transfusion hose and wraps it around Andre's neck. Hao and Susan assist Lin in pushing Andre into the reactor core of the ship. At the same time, the ship sustains severe damage, causing debris to collapse, which results in Lin losing his arm while Andre falls into the hot reactor core. Afterward, the three quickly flee, but unfortunately, Hao is left behind and trapped by debris. Lin and Susan make their way to the cabin, where Lin instructs Susan to take Nancy and jump off the ship using the parachutes. However, just then, Andre appears and grabs Lin. Lin kicks Susan, causing both women to plummet from the sky. During the battle, Andre accidentally injects his blood into Lin, granting Lin regenerative abilities and causing his hand to grow back. In the end, Lin manages to defeat Andre by ripping out his mechanical heart, which ultimately renders him powerless. When the ship explodes, Lin immediately jumps out, falls without a parachute, and gets hit on the head by debris, causing him to lose consciousness and drop the mechanical heart. Fortunately, Susan and Nancy rescue him by catching him with their parachute, ensuring he lands safely in the sea. When Lin regains consciousness, he swims up with Susan and his daughter. As they float in the sea, Susan gets word that an unknown individual has stolen Dr. James' handheld camera. The following day, Lin, Susan, and Nancy spend time at a night amusement park, where Susan reveals to Lin that Hao is the son of the arms dealer Andre had killed. It is also revealed that Hao has been following Nancy to get his revenge on Andre. On top of that, it turns out that he and Nancy had grown up together in the same orphanage. Just then, a clown hands Nancy a picture of her and Hao as children at the orphanage. Seeing the photo, Nancy realizes that Hao has survived and is still alive. In the final scene, Hao is seen looking for a potential buyer for Dr. James' handheld camera that he stole, bringing the movie to an end.
Thank you so much for staying till the end. If you enjoy this video, please consider leaving a like, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for future uploads.